Welcome to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters is the future. I am Farouk, Vice Provost at Johns Hopkins University, and today I've decided to tackle a very important topic that we all really need to spend more time thinking about and talking about: accessibility in education, in higher education more specifically, and wanted to really think about reimagining how we approach accessibility with all communities and communities with disabilities on college campuses and in educational institutions. So I decided to invite three people who I respect highly and in this space. Nicole Ofiesh, who is the director of the Schwab Learning Center at the Children's Hospital Council, and who worked prior to this as a director of the Learning Center at Stanford University. Welcome, Nicole. Glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Also invited Zandy Wong, who is a student, a sophomore at Johns Hopkins University. So Zandy, you are studying public health here at Johns Hopkins. So welcome. And also, I think for all of you to know is that Zandy is a force in activism in accessibility issues and for a community with disabilities, and has done a lot of good work, including founding an organization called the Next Gen Accessibility Initiative, and would love for you to just check it out. And last but not least, somebody who I've known for a long time and got to know during my time back when we were at Stanford, Zina Jawadi, who is now a medical student at UCLA. Also a major activist. You are, Zina, in the movement for accessibility, and have a lot of accomplishments as a result of all of your great work. So all three of you, you're joining this conversation. You're going to inform us and educate us and share a little bit of yourselves. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. I want to center this conversation first with what has happened in the last 2 years. And what we know is that during this pandemic, what we know is that colleges and universities were forced into a digital transformation that happened very quickly. And my question is, what has that done for the movement of accessibility and for communities with disabilities? Has it helped? Has it hurt? Did it take us backwards or forward as we rushed into the adoption of technology really quickly? Bring in online learning. There's just a lot that has changed in our world. And now 24 months later, I think there's an opportunity for us to assess and see where we are. So where have we landed on this? Maybe Nicole, you can get us started and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's a good question, Farouk. I think overall it has had a positive impact in the field of accessibility. It did not necessarily have a positive impact on all the lives of individuals with disabilities. But the reason why I say it had a positive impact is it forced us to rethink what accessibility means in the disability world. And accessibility is so often defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a legal concept that has a minimum threshold for providing access to people with disabilities. And I like to think what the pandemic did was kick it up a notch and force us to start thinking about universal design for learning, and design thinking, and really thinking about all the different ways that many different people interact in the online environment. Some individuals with a lot of mental health issues, social phobias, thrived in the online environment. Some did not, if there were issues with sound or working memory because of stress. All kinds of technological access. Many universities weren't prepared to move into a totally accessible online environment. And so it really forced them to rethink, what does access mean? And where are people on the continuum of learners? Like, there is such much broader perspective now than before on what learner variability means and how can we reach all learners.
Yeah, I think as a student, I graduated high school in 2020 and I started my first year of college amidst the pandemic. I think as a student, as a student with hearing loss, it was a little bit of a challenge to get accommodations, because I think everyone recognized that accessibility is important. But I think the big thing that people ran into barriers with ever-changing COVID restrictions and new environments was, how do we make things more accessible? And do we leave it up to the offices, or can we do it ourselves? And I think what I try to do in my work is really say that each of you can have a responsibility to make things more accessible. And it's not only just like a blanket of accessibility, it's also about asking the communities that are impacted specifically about what they want specifically. So it's a lot of transitioning and a lot of listening as well.
That overall, the pandemic in some ways actually did help increase awareness about accessibility. And to me, the reason why I say that is, for the first time, I'm hearing conversations about disability in places that I previously would have never heard it. And that for me makes me really happy. I also think that there's been increased, yes, cheers to that. There's also been increased use of technology, at least that from what I've observed, by people with and without disabilities. And I think that that has actually helped everyone. And I'll give a classic example of that is captioning. One thing I've noticed, for instance, is that, in my program, we have captioning for the recorded lectures, and pretty much everyone I know uses it. And they found that everyone who's using it has also said it's really helped them with their learning. So I think that it's not only being actively integrated now in places that it may not previously have in general, in the captioning and other different types of accessibility, but also I think that people are using it and beginning to appreciate how much we need it. At the same time, I do think that there have been many barriers to get accessibility needs addressed, and especially at the start of the pandemic, but also even today. And I think that there's still many challenges that may not have previously been needed. So for instance, one thing would be that people had to start thinking about a wide range of environments that they may not previously have. So for instance, they may need to think about accommodations in a virtual world, but also in an in-person world. So there's some dynamics there that happen. And even with captioning, as much as I use that example, and I'm so happy to see increased use of technology, the concept of automatic captioning has had a wide range of challenges, including today. And I'm happy to expand more on that, but I'll stop here for now.
Mm. Well, so I think that comment triggers for me just two questions. One is that an example of UDL, of Universal Design for Learning, that captioning might have been imagined as an accommodation for a group, but it actually has proven to be helpful to everybody, and it's being measured that way. And if so, how so? And then two, how is it challenging as an automated process of captioning? Is it that the fact that perhaps the technology is not smart enough to recognize different accents, or are there other areas of challenges around that? Any of you can jump in with that.
Well, I think I was really appreciated when Zina brought that example up, because it is a perfect example of universal design, right? Just like curb cuts were originally designed for individuals who use wheelchairs, right? But now we see that it's used by a whole host of individuals, right? Delivery drivers, people pushing carriages, baby carriages, and so on. And the same thing is happening in the informational access world. These tools that we thought were great for people predominantly who are hearing or visually impaired now seem to be very, very important to a whole range of individuals, from small children to the elderly and everyone in between. So I think it's a great example of universal design for learning and universal access. And what we're talking about, kicking this up a notch, going beyond the minimum threshold of the law. I think probably Zandy and Zina can really talk about the challenges in captioning, for an example, and why we really need to think through technology. But there's one other piece that I want to add that both Zandy and Zina brought up, is we have for so long placed the onus of change on the person with the disability. right? They have to prove that they are entitled to this accommodation. They have to navigate the process. And what we're really starting to see now is it's the environment. We need to create environments that allow for people to thrive. Not necessarily, it's up to you as the learner and how you're going to make use of this accommodation and navigate a system that wasn't designed for you to begin with. You know, I say that sarcastically. And we're really starting to rethink, no, this is about the environment so that all people are welcome to thrive.
I'm really glad you asked this question about this, because there is a distinction between accessibility and inclusion. So thank you for bringing that up. I also just want to clarify that my example was actually referring to a professional captioner who is transcribing the material, was not referring to automatic captions. Automatic captions is a lot more complicated. I'm happy to address that, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I also want to highlight that I completely agree that unfortunately, a lot of times, like a lot of these things were really addressed because the disability community was working on these actively and very hard. And I think that the fatigue and the exhaustion that came through has really increased a lot in the pandemic. And I think part of that has to do with this.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge that finally, when we're starting to see the outcome of all of that work, that to acknowledge that it's because of those efforts and the long-time advocacy from the disability community. I've always wondered, why was it so hard to be heard for so long, or was it because it was complicated to implement the solutions, or was it because why was it? Maybe I shouldn't say what my hypothesis is, but it feels like it just was taking so long before we started to see some of the early signs of change, culture change in universities and education institutions of education.
I'm happy to chime in again. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, please do.
But, so one of my I think there are multiple reasons that this is the case, but one thing I've noticed, at least from my personal experience, is that a lot of times the barriers are not immediately obvious to someone who doesn't have that disability. So for instance, one thing that doesn't come up a lot, but is actually very real in the hearing loss community, is exhaustion, like the listening fatigue. There's quite a bit of research on it. And now there's this term called Zoom fatigue, but that's really just listening fatigue. And this is something that's been extensively studied. So the reason why I mention this is that oftentimes, because these things are not immediately obvious, it can be hard for people to understand, like, what are the barriers? And one thing I've noticed is that once people get it, a lot of times things get addressed a lot faster. But oftentimes, especially for people with invisible disabilities, I know I'm using hearing loss a lot, but it's really like all disabilities, and especially invisible disabilities and chronic illnesses, that the barriers are really getting people to understand, like, what the challenges are. So I think that's something that is a big barrier in getting things addressed.
So it feels like it's maybe, I'm hearing you say it's a failure to empathize. I know you're using the word understand, but that's how I'm hearing it, is that it's a failure to empathize from the receiving end. And it's not until they get to a point where they truly empathize, either they see or feel or see the data or experience it themselves, that movement starts to happen. Zandy, what's been your experience?
I think it's same thing as Zina, is kind of emphasis on until it affects you. A lot of people don't really seem to care. And I think there's also emphasis, not really on the lack of knowledge, but the lack of knowledge that is able to be, able to be explained just in a very easy to understand manner to the public. We think about accessibility as just the role, not only the role of the disability community, but also the role of, like, web developers and people in the digital space. But it often seems as like an other thing. There's been a focus on centering that everyone can and should make the world a little bit more accessible, and that there is action too. So not just leaving as an other, but incorporating everyone into the role of advancing accessibility.
Can you all share a little bit about the advances that we've seen in technology up to date, and then what still needs to happen in technology? in order to make the world a more accessible place, but specifically education, and a more inclusive place for communities with disabilities?
Oh gosh, that is a huge question.
Yes. It is.
I was writing my paper the other day, and people with disabilities do use a lot of assistive technologies to navigate the world, but when the outer environment is inherently inaccessible to all, it just doesn't work out. And so there is a need for making just more websites, more social media platforms just automatically accessible. For example, I could talk about alt text for a while, but in social media, adding alt text to images to make things more accessible. When we have the screen readers, we can use them, but there's nothing to read. It doesn't work out at all. And so having the responsibility not only be on people using technology, but also the people that are creating these big environments to start with.
I think that's a really good point. I also want to jump in that I think we, even now with all the advances we've made in technology, we think of technology as the technology that is used by the vast majority of people. So technology defined as Zoom, technology defined as headphones, technology defined as font size. Rarely do we start bringing in that universal design for learning or universal design perspective where we start thinking screen readers are good for everybody. Closed captioning is good for everybody. Why aren't we giving everyone these options? And even in classes that talk about technology and education, rarely do we weave in those conversations about the plugins and the add-ons and the assistive and augmentative forms of communication that we should be teaching everyone about. So we're still thinking of education as one size fits all, even in the technology space, even with design thinking in these great startups. So I think we really start to need to be thinking about design thinking in terms of neurodiversity as we develop technology and universal design.
I completely agree. And I've always, as a long-term advocate, I've always believed that almost every time something that helps one person will help everyone else. And I'll give an example of something that I noticed. It's something that happened in high school. So it wasn't in higher ed, but it was in grad school, but it is something that I've never forgotten. I had a teacher who was he was an amazing instructor, and he quite literally changed the structure of his course to accommodate me. And one thing that he noticed, and these were things that were not captioning, they were things like writing more on the board. When he had these pre-recorded videos that he shared with us, he would write down everything and make sure that all the key points were emphasized. And there were other things that he did. And one thing that he commented in passing in class one day is he said, I noticed the class averages have gone up and it's really interesting. And and in particular in my class. And I thought, oh, that sounds very related, because all of these things that he's been doing helped everyone. Everyone was benefiting. And I think he started doing it in other classes as well after. But quite literally in performance by everyone improved, even though that was really intended it was initially intended to support me. And I really appreciate that teacher for that. And I think that really highlights in many ways the power of inclusion, and also the power of learning modalities, that people benefit from learning things in different ways. I'm happy to give another example about automatic captioning as well. And that is that I think, to answer your first question about what has really changed, I think automatic captioning is a great example of that, because if you think about where automatic captioning was 4 or 5 years ago, even if you go on YouTube, for instance, it wasn't as good as it is today. I mean, today it's truly in some ways phenomenal. If you go on Chrome, for instance, and enable the automatic caption extension that most people don't know about, it's quite good. I mean, it picks up very technical terms. So I think that's something that has really changed. Are there still a lot of challenges with technology? Yes. And for instance, FaceTime does not have automatic captioning. Zoom, the way to get it set up, it's really hard. And there were a lot of advocates like Sherry Eberts, for instance, who really advocated extensively on a national and international scale for automatic captions to be available on this platform.
Do you think that that automatic captioning should be opt-in or opt-out?
Opt-in. Automatically enabled is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meaning that you'll have to look to turn it off, not you'll have to look to turn it on. So
Yeah.
So which one is it for you? Do you have to look to turn it off?
You have to look to turn it off.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always wondered and then that might get us closer to a more inclusive and a more accessible environment.
Can I add something real quick, Farouk?
Yeah.
I think, well, I do a lot of work in advocating for technology. I think, and this is like a talk in the disability community, is that, well, there's 2 points here. One, that we can have all the technology, but we need to teach people how to use it properly to make sure that's inclusive for everyone. And 2, that technology isn't always going to be the answer. You know, we can have all these technologies here, but we also need to just ask individually what people need and make sure we have that kind of connection. For example, in one of my classes, I use this example a lot, that I was taking a CS class here at Hopkins, and my professor reached out to me via email because she knew I had accommodations. She was asking, what can I do for you? Because she was like planning to bring clear masks that she had bought on her own. And it was really sweet. And you know, just the fact that she had asked what I needed before advocating for myself was so special. I think I literally cried getting that email. And so, you know, not only including the technology and advancing digital accessibility, but also changing the culture. And this is what Nicole talks a lot about, changing the culture of that we need people to work together to get, you know, accessible environments.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
I want Zandy brought up something I think is so important, and I don't think she realizes just how important it was. You mentioned that your teacher offered to bring a clear mask. Could you explain to the listeners what that is and why?
Oh, I have a box with me. Let me get them out.
Because not a lot of people know, and I think your explanation is going to be really educational.
I think Talak, he's on the call right now. Talak gave me clear mask. But clear mask they're not as good as N95 masks. Let me see, can I see them? You can see it here. But essentially you can put them on and then you can, it's more useful for everyone to wear them, but you can lip read what they're saying. And for me, with hearing loss, that's so important. I think the biggest obstacle of going back to in-person learning, and honestly why I don't really like in-person learning anymore, is because there's so much noise going on for me. And so for someone with hearing loss, it's hard to try to read through an N95 mask of what someone is saying. But it was so empowering that, you know, my professor went out of the way to do that. And that was really exciting.
So I'm sorry for interrupting you, Farouk. I just think that it's really important.
I'm glad you did. Where can we get these clear masks? Are they widely available?
Yeah, so actually a Hopkins alumni, what's her name? I can't remember right now. The Hopkins alumni, the first deaf graduate from Hopkins, Alyssa Ditmar. I'll put the link in the chat. These are the only FDA regulated clear masks, and they're really good. So I'll put them in the chat. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you brought that up. Zandy, you said something that I want to follow up with you on, if you don't mind. You said you don't like in-person learning anymore. Is this connected to our conversation, or is it just the fact that you just got used to online learning the last couple of years?
That's like a whole nother conversation, not even regarding accessibility, but honestly, being able to, you know, watch lectures and then go back really easily and catch up on it is really amazing. The closed captioning and just being able to hear everything is a lot easier on Zoom than it is in person. And group projects, unfortunately, which I used to love a lot, are really hard for me to do in person nowadays because I just can't hear everyone going on, even with the captioner going on. And I think Zina can probably relate to this a lot. As a student with disability, there's often this kind of like struggle is like, should I disclose to my classmates that I have a disability or not, and trying to get them to speak up or trying to, you know, fight your way in, or is it just a matter of, you know, just telling people to speak up? So for example, I'm taking a public health class where I have a group project, And I got there a little bit late, but I met my group. And then I was trying to get them to, oh yeah, Talak has a lot of masks. I got this whole box from him. He's amazing. Trying to get them to speak up. And I just asked them to speak up, but there's often this struggle of like, do I disclose or not disclose? And, I think in the disability community, it's often this feeling of not being defined by your disability versus your disability defines you. And I've always been with the first one. So I didn't speak up, and, that resulted in some points losing on the assignment, which was unfortunate. But it's a matter of just really struggling to participate in group projects when there's just so much noise going around.
Mm. Yeah, I just want to pause on that. Go ahead, Zina.
I was going to add to that, but one thing so for us in our preclinical years, we actually had the option of attending lecture live in person, live remotely, or watch the recording. And I think that really does help everyone in terms of disclosure, because you mentioned that. I think that's a really important topic. And it's something that's very challenging, especially if you work with many different people, that it's really, for me, I'm very much the kind of, you were describing the spectrum of this disclosure. I'm someone who is very open about my hearing loss. I don't think I think I would be more surprised if people don't know I have hearing loss who work with me, just because I'm so open about it. But I think that one thing that happens is it can get really tiring if you're working with so many different people to constantly explain what you need. So that fatigue can be really real. And another thing about being able to join something remotely is that inherently, for instance, my room and the place I study is I have made it accessible and inclusive for myself. Like, I have designed it to be a place where I will thrive. So for instance, I have a computer sound amplifier that is amplifying sound based on the degree of hearing loss that I have. That actually goes and did a preliminary test. It looked at my audiogram, the company's team that is, and it made the volume loud enough. So even if the audio isn't good on their end, I can control that, and I don't have to explain my hearing loss. I can just adjust it automatically. So there is like a level of being able to control your environment in a way that is accessible for you. And I think for a lot of people with disabilities, especially in the pandemic, that is being something that has been really nice, is being able to create and being in an environment where you will thrive. So that's the benefit of remote learning.
Mm-hmm. I do want to also share with the audience that check with your student disability resource center on your college campus for all of these resources that are being shared, including the clear masks. I know our team here from Student Disability Services at Johns Hopkins University have shared in the chat that they do have some clear masks, and you can order them through them, and they have a bunch of other resources. So I want to acknowledge that. Many thanks for all the great work that all of them do, and we really appreciate you sharing that, Zina. I want to dive into the conversation about disclosing, and then also just how do we talk about it? What is the appropriate terminology to use? I've heard all sorts of terminology from disability to accessibility, neurodiversity. What is preferred in the community today, and where do we need to be in the future? What is the vision for the future?
That can be its own talk just in itself, by the way. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think this, for me at least, I'm going to focus on disability versus disabled, just because I think that's a good place to start. So, and also that you mentioned some examples about abilities. So there is this dynamic where it's like identity first versus person first language. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. And this is a theme in a lot of communities. So the identity first is an example. The example would be disabled, where it's like, I am disabled, or this person is disabled. And the idea is that means that is a part of their identity. There are people who like using that kind of language, and because it is their identity. For other people, their disability is not necessarily part of their identity. It may be, or even if it is, they may just not want to be called disabled. And so some of the other language is the person first language, which would be person with disability. I personally, my general belief is to always ask. But if I had to have a default, like for instance, I'm referring to a general, if it's not for any specific individual, but for a group, I would instead just say people with disabilities, just because not everyone identifies as disabled, but I've noticed that and more people tend to identify with people with disabilities, but it also depends on which community you're referring to. There are some communities that explicitly want to be identified as disabled.
I think the most important thing in, asking people with disability is just don't assume anything and just ask them what they want to be identified as. I think that's the most important part of talking about disability. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's in support of everything that Zina and Zandy just said. I think we also have to take it to the next level if we're talking about what is the future of disability. So I think the future of disability is recognizing that we're going above a threshold of how we can provide access for people based on this term disability, and that we are really rethinking how we can create environments that already build in 90% of the accessibility. Accommodations will never go away. You can never predict all the different nuances that will come up because of what we know about intersectionality. So what do we mean by intersectionality in terms of disability and identity? I can be someone who is disabled, but I'm also first generation to college and low income. And that may or may not have given me a different background to exposure to technology. And I now really my biggest struggle may not be my disability, but it's how do I navigate the world of higher education when I'm the first person in my family that ever went there. I don't know the difference between a scholarship and a fellowship and a grant. And I'm afraid to go to a teacher, and disability may have been a stigma in my culture. So there's no way I want to ask for accommodations, right? So and then you can overlay that on top of being gay or transgender. And there's all these other complex issues that come up with people with disabilities and identifying identity. So I think when we talk about what does this mean in the future is not pigeonholing people with disability and really embracing their lived experience as a whole person, and all the complexities that each person with disability may or may bring to higher education.
Well said.
To add to that, I love what you said. And to add to that, I think from the higher ed perspective, like where would I want disability to be? For starters, I would like to see more increased representation of people with disabilities in these spaces. Like for instance, medicine, it's pretty well known that in STEM, people with disabilities are grossly underrepresented in STEM. And so I would love to see representation. I would love to see services that are specifically designed for people with disabilities in higher ed and not necessarily just designed for undergrad campuses. A lot of campuses, they may not necessarily have the specific space for it. They may not have the specific resources for the grad students. And that's something that I would love to see. And really, even just in some fields in itself, it's so complex that they may need their own resources. But again, that's getting a bit detailed. I would love to see spaces where disability is celebrated and that there's research that's actively addressing disability beyond representation. And finally, to add to the point about intersectionality, I would love to see more conversations about disability and the intersection of it with other groups. And inherently, people with disabilities are underrepresented. And I would love for that to be acknowledged in spaces and professional organizations that in professional organizations in general.
What I would love to see all that Zina talked about. I do chat about that a lot. I think one other thing that I would love to see, especially in higher education and with career services offices such as Hopkins Life Design Lab, is a transition on how to tell your story as a person with disability transitioning into a career, or what resources are there out there for people with disabilities in getting employment opportunities. Besides higher education, people with disabilities are often underemployed, and there's sub-minimum wages. We're not going to go into that, but there's so much there that, it's often a conversation of when to disclose versus not when to disclose, and what benefits you can bring as a person with disability, because we talk a little bit about this, about identifying as disabled. Some people see it as a superpower, others just see it as part of the lived experiences. Where I fall along the line of, I just see it as part of my lived experiences, and I hope it's shaped every project that I join, the actions I do. But it's also a valuable part to bring to the workplace and to future education environments. And I would love some support from the faculty or just advisors in general on how to explain that to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I know, Nicole, when you and I hear this as administrators of these types of programs, I can't help but think that we have a unique opportunity to redesign the whole thing 2 years after this pandemic, because it gave us an opportunity to pause, to have to make a lot of changes in the last 2 years, and now we're coming out of this pandemic. And we have an opportunity not to just go back to the way things were and then just do the patchwork of adding things that accommodate communities with disabilities, but rather just really redesign the entire thing. Well, how do we move forward? How do institutions of higher education and learning institutions and organizations can move forward to really redesign the entire framework in order for it to be more accessible?
So I'll tell you the practical challenge, and then I'll tell you my dream vision. Yeah. The practical challenge is that the basis for all of this, the motivation for institutions of higher ed, for all of this, is based on a legal premise, right? That's the incentive. Most universities don't come from a place of empathy and humanity where we're saying, we want to do a good job so that all of our individuals thrive. All of our students become expert learners. And what I mean by an expert learner is going back to the example Zina said, where a teacher made a change in a class for her, and all of a sudden people started to become greater expert learners, right? So, but unfortunately, the motivation for access is often based on the law. So I think we have to acknowledge that, and have to acknowledge that it is important for an institution to have that in place. And things could go completely wacky if we innovated, to the point where we just disregarded the law. So we have to respect the law. That's first and foremost, and use that as a basis to begin what we're thinking. But I think we really need to move into the design thinking approach because the design thinking approach does begin with empathy. That's the first part of design thinking. And anytime we start to think about redesigning a program, redesigning a building, redesigning a course of study, redesigning a class, we begin with the design thinking approach. And that always brings in all the parties. Who are the students? Who are the faculty? It's interesting. If you build a new building on campus and you ask the architects who's going to use this building, they often think of faculty first. They think the faculty because the faculty teach. Often it's secondary that they think the students are going to be using it, and they are the recipients of the education. So really, it's not about what's going to make this easiest for the faculty to convey knowledge and exchange and create a learning environment, but really bringing in everybody involved, everybody, and using that design thinking approach that begins with empathy. Then we can begin to build products, services, buildings, and educations that is available to the widest body of learners. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense, in its most simplistic forms, even just revisiting all of our language that we use, from recruitment all the way to graduation and beyond, and in our brochures. Like the one thing that I can't help but to notice is in ceremonial occasions, commencement, for example, there is always the request for people to stand to be acknowledged and recognized, and it always makes me wonder, like, okay, but why are we choosing standing versus something else? And why are we assuming that everyone in this room who you want to acknowledge can stand or wants to stand? Maybe there's a different way to do this. And that's like in its most simplistic form. these are some of the changes, but they can't happen as a patchwork. I mean, it literally is, there needs to be an interest from institutions of higher education to truly go back and rebuild with a mindset of universal design for learning, where everything is designed with the way that is accessible, and it helps all, it helps everyone, just like the examples that were shared here. Don't you all agree? It's Zina and Zandy? Yeah. It feels right. So there are questions coming in the chat room, and I also want to, and thank you, Zina, for helping address some of those questions in writing. I also would like to say that if anyone wants to jump in live, I'm happy to bring you in and ask your question in person. So in order to do that, just raise your hand in the room, and we'll be able to bring you in, and you can join the conversation for a minute. So now that we're trying to imagine this future, what are the obstacles and how can we make it happen? I would like us to move from conversation to actually action, to really try to move this. So let's talk, for example, about the example of a dedicated space for communities with disabilities. This was a big thing on college campuses before the pandemic, but the pandemic has transformed what it means to have a dedicated space. For the last 2 years, even the notion of physical spaces has changed and what they are used for. Moving forward, how do we imagine the future college campus, and whether and how to include that vision for a community space for students with disabilities?
Farouk, can I jump into a question that was put in the chat that addresses to this?
Yeah.
Addresses this? Well, the question was, how can we, when faculty are reluctant to empathize, what can we do to raise this level of empathy? You know, I think there's two things we can do. One is all faculty are onboarded on a university. All faculty go through an incoming faculty training. And I think all faculty should be taught how to rethink the design of their class with universal design for learning principles, and also be provided the support to do that, especially at Research One universities, where the primary incentive for the faculty member is not necessarily teaching. There are many, many, many wonderful R1 faculty members who are completely devoted to teaching, but their incentive is publications and bringing in grant writing. So it's harder to get the buy-in to really rethink, how am I going to create a really fabulous class where I foster expert learning. So I think anytime we can create support for faculty, and Hopkins has a good program to do that, you know, where they really help faculty to embed principles of universal design for learning. So I think if we start with that design thinking approach as we onboard faculty institutions, it will grow. As faculty who are resistant to change retire, the newer faculty will be able to participate in this. I think the other piece is, you know, at Stanford School of Medicine, I participate in teaching a class called Design Thinking for Neurodiversity, which is really, neurodiversity is a fancy word for design thinking for everybody who doesn't think like the vast majority of people or operate or perform. And the beautiful thing about that is we are training students, we are training educators, teachers, doctors, everybody, business people, on how to employ facets of design thinking and universal design learning for the broadest population of learners. And that is also equally powerful, because then those people graduate and take that out into the world, rather than, you know, always teaching a new incoming group of faculty to do something different. I think if we can work with faculty to understand empathy and design thinking and diversity, and we can simultaneously teach our students what this means, then they take it out to the world. Then you are creating, you know, the Pied Pipers of the world who are going to share this message and take it into their work environments as well.
This was a great question, and I'm really glad that you asked it. So I think for the future, I would almost organize it into three categories, which is one, disability in school, two, disability in research, and three, creating a space for disability and empowering people with disabilities. So in terms of the first one, which is disability in school, I would say just inherently kind of adding to the UDL. I'm a huge believer in UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and I personally think that it should be incorporated into every aspect of life. So I'm a huge fan of it. And Dr. Ofiesh is laughing because she's known this about me for many years. So I think that should be inherently incorporated. And I think that by creating an inclusive environment, inherently people with students with disabilities will thrive just by that in itself. Like everyone, and not just students with disabilities, everyone will thrive, especially underrepresented groups. So the other thing I would say is I think that every person, student, faculty, staff, should all be trained on how to incorporate disability, which is touched upon earlier. I also think one thing we haven't talked about is having third-party neutral advocates. So for me, I have a faculty member, a mentor who has been a huge advocate in this disability space and has been really made a big difference in my life and has advocated for me in ways that I wouldn't have even been able to. So thank you to her. And she has hearing loss, so she gets it. And it's like really incredible to have someone who can advocate for me and also knows the right people to go to if I need something. So I think having like a third neutral advocate can go a really long way. And I think for the research part, I would say actively incorporating disability into recruiting people for studies, incorporating disability into and making it and creating funding so that research can be done on disability and for the disability community. And finally, in terms of empowerment, in addition to empowering, just creating mentorship opportunities, I would also say having a space for the disability community and actively recruiting people with disabilities to campus and to jobs. So those are that's what I think.
I think my hopes for the future, one, they're very long term, but the first one and what I do in my work is, treat accessibility as something that should be taught as part of school curriculum. We teach Spanish in like K through 12 schools. And what I would love for the future is just like, we have like computer skills kind of class in elementary school and middle school when I was growing up, although it's a lot different than it was nowadays. Why don't we include accessibility in the curriculum there? Why can't we have kids, that learn how to do simple tricks on how to make the world a little more accessible? And I think the second part of this is acknowledging that everyone's experiences dealing with disability are so valid. And thinking about what do we define as disability. We see many movies and just media about maybe just like a person in a wheelchair or a person with a visible disability. There are so many invisible disabilities and visible disabilities that might not seem so obvious, but are definitely impacting everyone's day-to-day life. And that's my hope for disabled communities going forth.
I'm really glad you said that, Zandy, because individuals with invisible disabilities really struggle with getting into others to believe that their experience is really real. And they're put through a lot of hoops to document, justify, not just that a disability exists, but that it's severe enough to warrant a disability. Again, it goes back to the law. I'm not going to question the law. I'm not an attorney, but it puts so much responsibility, stigma, and vulnerability and anxiety on the person with a disability that we could minimize so much of this if we could rethink the environment where we want our students to thrive ahead of time.
Yeah, this makes me think of an example that I've had in the past, in past experience at a different university, where we had to deal with a faculty member who felt that they needed more evidence from students in order to provide the accommodation for more time for exams. That was really challenging to deal with because and I'm sure you do too, I've always looked at it as, well, what if you just gave the additional in time for exam for everyone? You just make it a standard, meaning, it's not about everybody. You just make it a standard as part of your syllabus, that the time that's requested, you just make it a standard practice. And then you no longer have to have a system to manage all of these accommodations, as they refer to them. And also, I mean, I questioned even just the place that question was coming from, is, that there must be a lie, or I can't, it's not a visible disability. So I question the authenticity of that information, and whether it really is true that student requires additional time for exam. This is, again, like this is where these things show up on a college campus, when it's not, when UDL is not applied, when the ecosystem and the entire infrastructure is not built with accessibility in place. It's built as an accommodation on the periphery. Then we're constantly having to provide sort of like bridges to that, and we're having to convince and educate, as opposed to it's just integrated in the process. Does that trigger anything for you?
Well, for me as a researcher in extended time for the past 30 years, that triggers about a million things.
And you are the expert in universal design for learning, I should say.
Well, and the extended piece.
If you want to learn about UDL, look up Nicole Ofiesh.
I want to address the extended time issue in a nutshell. What I love about that question, one, is the reason why many people don't believe that everyone should have extended time is they genuinely believe that fast is better, which goes back historically to our oldest theories of IQ. That's one. So we've got to dispel what we know now. If you read a lot of the new books that are out, a lot of the new research that is out, really suggests that the skills for the 21st, and I'm going to say the 22nd century, are really about problem solving, reflection, and creative thinking. And that takes time. There is a great article in the Harvard Business Review that really talks about the need to take time to be a good problem solver, a good innovator, and creative reflective thinkers. There are certain things that you do need to be a fast thinker for, but that's usually rote sequential memory, or something that nowadays there's technology to deal with that. Right. And we're still stuck in that paradigm that fast is better. And our most recent research is saying that that's not necessarily true. But then there's another piece to the why don't we give everybody extended time? The question that I would ask is, why is everyone taking the same assessment? If you really think about universal design for learning, everyone shouldn't be taking the same assessment. And there can be, and administratively, it can be done very easily if you think it through. That's why I was in the beginning, if you teach faculty how to do that, an option for 2 or 3 assessments that really allow an individual to demonstrate their best work according to the type of evaluation that can best illustrate that. And it may be different. And there is a way to do that where you are retaining rigor. Everyone is being assessed on the same criteria, and you are not watering down the curriculum. In fact, you are watering it up, and you are maintaining rigor and allowing students to show their best work. So I had to get that in, and I'm so grateful you asked that question, Farouk. I mean, you can tell I'm so passionate about that. It's just important to me.
Well, I love your answer. I'm learning so much from you, as I always do. Zina and Zen, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you explained it in a perfect way. That my first reaction was too that we should not even need extra time. In an ideal world, in my opinion, exams could be timeless, and then you don't have to worry about it. And I think
what a concept.
Yeah, I think one thing I should have highlighted earlier is I think in an ideal world, I would love to have a space where people don't need to feel the need to disclose to get what they need. I think this is another thing that comes up, is that oftentimes people feel like they have to divulge personal health information to get accommodations. And unfortunately, sometimes like that is what happens is that, and a lot of times that's what ends up happening. So in an ideal world also, I would love to see a space where people with disabilities and chronic illnesses did not need to have to disclose their personal health information to get what they need.
That is, yes, let's give that a hand, because that is brilliant. Is that if that, I feel like that is the metric that
Yes.
we want to get to, or one of them, or one of the important ones, is that we do not have to require people to disclose things in order to get these types of services. That it should be just integrated. It should be just what just happens in this institution. So you alluded a little bit to this, and I want to use the last few minutes that we have to talk about the transition from an educational institution to the workplace. I often say what is happening on a college campus or an educational institution today, you will see it tomorrow at the workplace. And both of you, Zina and Zandy, are going to transition to workplaces in the future. Internships, residency, workplaces, etc. So what happens with this conversation? How is disclosure handled? What do workplaces need to do in order to also make their environments more accessible and inclusive? How can higher education impact the workplace? And what are the challenges and the opportunities that we have there? It's a lot of questions for just a couple of minutes. But I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about that.
I can start off. I think the most important thing in transitioning to a workplace, and what I love about DEI Collective here at Hopkins, is that this applies to all groups as well, but, treating disability as not just a statistic, just not just hiring people just to fill a quota, also valuing the experiences and seeing what they can bring to the table. And I think as far as self-disclosing, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I do a lot of disability advocacy work, so it just ends up coming up. But it's also just taking the time to listen as an employer and as a fellow employee to what a person has to say, instead of shutting them out and assuming that they don't need anything.
This is a great question. And a fun fact that many people don't know is that I actually worked before going to medical school. So I worked in consulting. So I actually do have some experience on the work front. So to answer that question, I think from a high level perspective, one would be, as a company, to assume at least one person on your team has a disability or chronic illness, even if you don't know that they do. And maybe they don't know. Sometimes that's another thing. Sometimes people have undiagnosed health matters or disabilities. So so that's one thing. The other thing I would say is, I think just creating a really inclusive, welcoming environment that encourages hybrid work and encourages people to work where they will thrive. And what do I mean by that? People love working in the office, and there are other people who prefer working at home for whatever reason. Maybe noise is really hard and it's difficult to get work done in a productive manner in an office because there are multiple conversations happening at the same time. Just an example. So having an environment where people can choose where to work, and establishing that kind of trust and inclusivity that people just get work done is, I think, will go a very way in supporting people. And another thing is to proactively consider disability. I'm actually really, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, but one of my biggest mottos is that I think disability should be proactively considered and not reactively considered. And so that goes back to assuming that at least one person has a disability or chronic illness. So trying to anticipate what are things that may come up if you've already gotten a job, and actually addressing it before it comes up can go a long way. If someone discloses a disability and you're in their team, thank them for disclosing it. Ask them what do they want, and actually work on trying to figure out solutions in a fast way. That was something I really loved about the team I worked with when I worked, is that they were really so gracious, and they were so fast in adapting and figuring out the issues for me and solutions that I hadn't even considered. So I just think that having including abilities.
Thank you, Zina. I really appreciate this, and Zandy also for your comments. Nicole, I'll give you the last words of the hour. Just went by really quickly. What does the future look like, and or what does it need to look like?
I think the future looks like beginning to think about all people and the diversity for all people across many levels of intersectionality, including disability, and creating a more humane, compassionate environment, and really bringing that into higher education and valuing that as something that is real and important to our youth that's creating our society. I think it's the basis for a lot of problems that can be solved. But I also want to thank you, Farouk, for creating such a fun venue. This was really nice. Thank you.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Nicole, you were very informative in this hour, and I so appreciated this time to connect. Zina, you were so inspiring with all of your examples and your personal story. And Zandy, you are just brilliant and just full of knowledge and inspiring. And we're so proud to have you in our Johns Hopkins community. The three of you have been just amazing. I really enjoyed today's vision chat with all of you. And more than enjoyed it, I learned a few things, and I'm inspired to go and learn even more in order to help make this world a more accessible and inclusive place. I appreciate all of you who joined us today. And as I always say, the only vision that matters is the one that you create. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.